But when it comes to energy, which is at the core of everything that exists on the planet, and the need for a good energy infrastructure, well, there's a web of dark money tied to Obama and the Democrats in whatever form that is now fueling the opposition to our needed and underway energy plan. The Honorable Jason Isaac joins me now to talk about this. And Jason, you're a man who knows a thing or two about American energy at the American Energy Institute, where you founded this and you lead it. So let's talk about this opposition and what's really going on and who's funding.
Yeah, there are. You talk about dark money organizations. I mean, some of them are actually out in the light of day. There's a group called the U.S. Energy Foundation, which was spun out of the Energy Foundation China. It's like, hey, let's drop the China at the end of our name. Let's add U.S. at the beginning so we sound American and maybe people believe us. But you look at where the employees are of this Energy Foundation China. They're in Beijing. They have offices in San Francisco, but most of their employees are in Beijing. You can look at their website. It doesn't look like anything American at all. And they're spreading this fear and alarmism by dumping millions of dollars into think tanks in the U.S. to force wind and solar into our grids and scare people that are now suffering from eco-anxiety when the weather couldn't be better around the world. But they're funding institutions of higher education. They're putting money into colleges to do the same thing. And now you've got groups like the National Academies of Science that are going to kind of counter the Department of Energy report on climate that just came out in the last few weeks, which is interesting because this organization refused to evaluate the COVID pandemic and the origins of COVID without a government request. But now here they are. They're going to go out and do research, so-called research, on this Department of Energy report on climate, which is just laughable because there has been no government request. And the person leading the research is the left-wing dark money hive, Arabella Networks. They're affiliated with that organization, which does. It funds all these organizations using dark money to drive a narrative, and that narrative is really counter to our economic prosperity, environmental leadership here in the United States, and that's one of energy dependence, not energy dominance.
When you look into the background of this organization, and by that the people there, Jason Mark, the CEO, and others, and you look into their backgrounds, to what extent you can get more information, it's clear where their goals are. But I want to go to something even more fundamental, and I wonder why, as you talk about this, a spin-off from a China, right, Energy Foundation China, when they stood themselves up, they did this as a 501c3 nonprofit. But they're engaged in what is prohibited, and I'm someone who sits on a few C3 boards, and I have built a C4 organization, advocacy and political activity versus nonprofit and non-political activity. How do they get away with this?
Well, that's something that needs to be looked into, and it's exciting because you've got groups like Ted Cruz, U.S. Senator from Texas, held some hearings over their connections recently. Now the House is going to investigate them, and groups like the Environmental Law Institute and their Climate Judiciary Project, which are tainting judges around the United States with so-called climate science. It has nothing to do with climate or science. It has something to do with a religion and a narrative and ideology that's being forced down our throats. But they certainly shouldn't get protection from the Internal Revenue Service with the status of a 501c3 like a church, because they are operating as a political organization and receiving funding and control from the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that was not the intent of 501c3s, is to protect our adversaries, but we're doing exactly that. Justice needs to look into this. The IRS needs to look into this. They should probably lose their status And really, we need to know where the funding is coming from and where it's going.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, the ELI, Environmental Law Institute's Climate Judiciary Project, I talked about that last week, operating in multiple states, meetings and training sessions with, I think, an estimated 2,000 judges. What I'm seeing here, and as I look at other efforts, is a combined effort coming from many angles, whether it's working in the judiciary to subvert the judiciary of the United States, the Article 3 courts are in any way, on one side, going after energy and industry in others, and training people in colleges and, let's call it what they were called under communism, useful idiots, to go out there and hit the streets and keep pushing this. This is a combined effort. It's not a one-off. And at the core of this, as you dig a little deeper, you go back to a lot of the Obama administration and the former President Obama himself.
Yeah, you look at the people that are leading these organizations. Arabella, there's other groups. Out of Boston, Mindy Lubber, former EPA administrator, leading Sirius, which is a network that just funnels money into organizations. They're part of the dark money network, and it's these former Obama officials, and now apparently Obama himself. And it is the Democrat operative at work. It's Sierra Club and Greenpeace that are just appeasing their millionaire mega donors, their failed climate crusaders. Which is interesting. I don't get the connection with Hamas. Like, why are these groups so aligned with Hamas and Palestine now? They're completely losing focus of their intent, and that's to scare people about the climate, which we're amazingly living wonderfully well through. Deaths down nearly 99.9% over the last 100 years from severe weather-related events, but they're losing their focus. I think the American people are waking up to the realization that they're just about fear and anxiety and not about anything to do with protecting the environment, because we've proven here in the United States we're world leaders at doing that, and we do it with access to affordable and reliable energy, something billions of people around the planet that are spending countless hours walking to collect water today, facing dangers that we take for granted. They would love to have access to affordable and reliable and preferably American-produced energy.
One of the things that concerns me and should concern all of us about this, and I'm going to use the example of one man, one part of the Energy Foundation, Patrick Woodcock. Now, interestingly enough, in Massachusetts, under Charlie Baker, a quote, Republican governor, questionable on policy, he was embedded as the commissioner of the Department of Energy Resources, at the same time pushing solar policies, offshore wind, building codes, changing the environment. Then I look at his background before that, and this is what I encourage people to do. Dig in and see who these people are. Because prior to that, he was in the LePage administration in Maine. And you start tracking this, and they're embedding themselves at the state levels, even in, well, I guess you can call it some Republican organizations or Republican administrations and more. And while we talk a lot about deep state at the federal level, there is a deep state at the state level.
There absolutely is, and there are a lot of these so-called right organizations or right-of-center organizations that have called themselves conservative, that have these agendas that they're pushing. But you look at some of their dissolution papers, if they dissolve and all of their assets go to left-wing organizations. But they've done a good job of fooling politicians at the state and at the federal level that we need to decarbonize, that we need to reach net zero. And thankfully, we have an administration that's not falling for that, with Administrator Zeldin, Secretary Chris Wright, President Trump working to rescind the endangerment finding, which was one of these deep state tools that the Obama administration put in 2009, which was not an act of Congress. These deep state bureaucrats did this, and they said that the Clean Air Act should regulate CO2 emissions because they pose a danger to human health and the environment, when that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm so grateful that this administration is looking to get rid of that, because that is the bedrock for all climate policy. All Green New Deal policy falls on the endangerment finding, is dependent on the endangerment finding, and it's all based on, one of your previous callers mentioned the climate cult's Kool-Aid, or the cult's Kool-Aid. The climate cult's Kool-Aid is decarbonization, and the result is the same as the Jim Jones Kool-Aid, it's death. And it does nothing to mitigate a changing climate. So I'm grateful, but some of these organizations that align themselves with center-right groups, they need to be called out and exposed for what they are, because they are just tools of the left. Like you said, useful idiots.
My guest, Jason Isaac, the Honorable Jason Isaac, CEO of the American Energy Institute. I want to go back to something you said, because I think it, especially given what I've seen going on around the world this weekend in media when it comes to Gaza and Palestine and radicalism and the pro-terrorist support that's growing, we need to understand the intersections, as you and I talked about, the justice program. Now here's the energy side of it, but they're all tied together. The Tides Foundation is behind a lot of this, right? You look at their reports, their tax returns, their 990s. You look at where they are. They bankroll a lot of these anti-Israel, I call them pro-terrorist protests on college campuses, the Alliance for Global Justice and more. And one of the groups that you've talked about and helped expose, the Samadoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, a group that the Department of the Treasury has designated as a sham charity that serves as an international fundraiser for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a known terrorist organization.
Yeah, it's absolutely appalling. And Tides Foundation, it was discovered, I think, during the DOGE process that they were receiving funding from U.S. aid. Just we were talking earlier about the Environmental Law Institute. I think it was last week that Montana Attorney General Knudsen sent a letter along with 22 of his counterparts from other states signing on, calling on the Environmental Protection Agency to stop its grants to the Environmental Law Institute. Nearly 13% of the Environmental Law Institute's budget in 2023 came from taxpayer grants. The following year, it was close to 10% of their total revenue. Their operating budget comes from taxpayers. And so to have taxpayers funding groups like Tides that are funding terrorist organizations, campus protests, driving animosity in our country, and really an anti-American agenda is appalling. I'm grateful for DOGE and these continued investigations where every penny of our money is being spent. It needs to be spent for its appropriate purposes, not on political agendas. And so we've really got to cut this out. And I wish the media would stop giving attention to that Dutch girl that shows up at climate protests around the world. Now she's on some flotilla.
Right.
I mean, she's
was
absolutely
watching
completely
that over the weekend.
useless.
Yeah.
I mean, what a useless individual.
But it shows how far they go. They left Barcelona. I guess they ran into a little weather, and now they're heading back out. This is what I was watching this weekend, this gameplay that's going on at Greta Thunberg with others, Liam from Game of Thrones, who was there as well, Susan Sarandon, who's apparently going to join the flotilla. So this cacophony of leftist and uninformed and frankly ignorant voices, but they're committed. You've talked about Friends of the Earth. They endorse Black Lives Matter. They're for defunding the police from all angles, many angles. These leftist groups are working together.
You talk about another scam of an organization. I mean, Black Lives Matter, just absolutely, using the proceeds to buy homes. I mean, just to fund their lavish lifestyles. What an absolute scam. And that's what these organizations are. They wouldn't survive a day in Hamas captivity. Although they align with them, they think that they, can expose their faces and their hairs, their hair now. Try living in Palestine controlled by Hamas and see how long they live, because they wouldn't last a minute. They realize how oppressive that government is. Nothing about freedom whatsoever, just ignorance.
Yeah. Let me dip into my Larry the Cable Guy head for a moment. Lord, forgive me. I kind of want them to let the flotilla through into Gaza and see how that works out. By the way, those are known as more hostages for Hamas. But just how I feel about it. Jason,
I don't think President Trump would try to rescue those hostages, though. So
you went there.
Forgive me.
You went there. I know, Jason. I know it's not Christian-like or something like or whatever like. I kind of want them to let them in and see how that works out. I don't know.
Yeah, they're evil and ignorant at the same time, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. Jason, great to have you here, man. Great work, really great work. Keep it up. We've got to inform the people. The American Energy Institute, and of course the website AmericanEnergyInstitute.com, and Jason Isaac, who founded it and leads it as its CEO. Thank you.
It's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
866-95-PATRIOT, 957-2874. Good information there, folks. Go check it out.